Welcome to Resume the Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Page, and I'm here to spread the message that you can, in fact, be happy in your career. I'm a former executive recruiter turned career coach, and I am obsessed with learning about why people have chosen their career, what led them to that decision, and how they achieved happiness in the process. So, come join the ongoing conversation that exposes you to career paths of all origins with one thing in common: happiness. So, press play and let's resume the conversation with this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first 2024 recording. Of course, this will probably air later on in 2024, but we have the wonderful Coach David Kitchen on the pod today, and I'm very excited. So David and I have a mutual connection, and we had a little conversation before this, and I was like, this guy is amazing, and basically he needed to be on the podcast way before now, but scheduling and all that. So I'm so happy, and we had tech issues this morning, so he's been extremely patient and wonderful already. So who is David Kitchen? If you haven't heard of him, he is the founder and president of Edge Leadership Academy. He's a former Division I coach and a PhD candidate with a master's in sports psychology. He's dedicated about a decade of experience to building leaders, culture, and mindset at the highest levels of sports and business. He is the author of 2 books, I believe, one called The Pyramid, a system for building tomorrow's leaders today, and The Scoreboard, a self-audit system to help you build the life you want, which sounds like something everybody could probably use. As a speaker, consultant, and coach, Coach Kitch is trusted by 100+ CEOs, coaches, and high performers to help them lead and win in business, athletics, and life. Coach Kitch, which I love, thank you so much for being here.
Courtney, what's going on? I'm happy to be here. I'm glad we worked through all our tech issues. It's finished Friday where we're at, so we get to have some fun here. So I'm excited to do this.
Me too. Yeah. And it's so funny. When I was setting up, I was telling the lovely Joe, who helps out and owns this space. I was like, yeah, this week, I don't know what it was, but it was like the tech gods just decided to on me. All of my subscriptions expired. I had to re-up everything. I got closed out of it was just nuts. And I was like, let's, 2024, I don't know what this is with tech, but this week has been a tech nightmare. So I so appreciate all of the patience on your end.
No, I trust me. I get it. Listen, I tell people as an entrepreneur, the worst thing you can do is ever think about how much of your business is actually tied to tech. What would actually happen if the tech stopped working?
It gives me nightmares. Oh my God. Okay. So to start off, leaving tech behind, and let's just pray that it keeps continuing to work. I like to start off by asking everybody, if you were at a dinner party or some kind of social gathering and somebody started talking you up and you're chit-chatting, and they eventually, usually always ask, what do you do? What would your response be?
Yeah. Wow. What do I do? I've simplified leadership and high performance into frameworks so that people can actually take action. So put simply in one sentence, I try and push as many people into the arena of life as I possibly can.
What do people say to that? What is the response usually?
Why would I want to get in the arena? Number one. And I usually ask, are you happy with where you're at? Is there a little voice that keeps you up at night that tells you there's more that you could do? You could lead better. You could be a better father, husband, mother, brother, sister, whatever. And usually the answer is yes to that. There is that little voice. And I'm like, well, that's what I do. I help you listen to that voice, and I help you build the skills that you need to lead in your relationships and lead in your life and lead in your business.
That's awesome. And of course, something that most people probably need. So I want to go back a little bit. I like to kind of lay the groundwork for people to understand where you came from and what really held you on this path. So also the whole point of this podcast, the reason I started it was because, most people are really unhappy in their careers or complacent at best. Most people just spend a lot of time complaining about their careers or, their bosses or whatever. And that is normal. I mean, it's been so normalized, I'm not talking down to those people in any way. It's more I've been there, so I get it. And the whole point of this podcast was you know what, I'm going to find people who are actually happy in their career and find out, what they did and how they did it that got them to a happy place and waking up every day excited to do their work. And you emanate happiness. You're just like the big ball of happiness, and I love it. So what were you like as a kid? What did you want to be as a kid when you grew up?
Yes. So I actually grew up in a single parent household. So my mom had me, single mom. I had a younger brother. We had a stepdad in the picture that kind of struggled, not kind of, he did. He struggled with addiction, was a long haul truck driver, kind of in and out of the picture. It was kind of rocky, at times as a child, but it taught me so much because I had to grow up, right? I had to grow up at a young age. I had to be the role model for my brother, and I had to kind of be this protector for my family. And so, most people grow up at 18. I grew up at 11. So that's kind of what I was like as a child. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. Like people, a lot of times are like, oh, you went through this or you saw that. And I'm like, I did, but I also learned so many skills that helped me so like along my entire journey, right? Like I learned emotional intelligence at a very young age because I had to learn how to read the room. Like I had to figure out what kind of mood is this guy in when he walks in the door, right? I got to figure out like, where's mom at? Does she need me to be a kid right now? Or does she need me to be a man? Where are we at? And so that taught me to read rooms really quickly. I also learned how to lead with love. Like no matter what was going on, my mom led with love. Like that was her answer to everything. When things got bad, we were out helping the YMCA or helping the Boys and Girls Club deliver, bag lunches and things like that. And so I learned these really valuable lessons that I wouldn't trade for the world, So as much as on the outside, people might say it was a rocky childhood or this or that. And to me, it was perfect childhood to mold me into who I am today.
Wow. That's really rough for any kid to have to go through. And it's interesting to hear you talk about your mom and how she was really that role model of, leading with love as opposed to, anger or despair or a why being kind of attitude.
Yeah.
You said you had a brother?
I had a younger brother. Yeah.
Okay,
Older brother.
younger. Okay, yeah. So you were the older one too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was dad and big brother.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And just out of curiosity, how did that experience shape your relationship with like your mom now and your brother now?
Yeah, it's kind of different than I think a lot of families have. So like me and my brother, for a long time, there was this balancing act, right? Like I said, between brother and father, right? So when things hit the fan and he acted out, like it was on me to come and fix it. And so I remember coming home from college and having to like yell at him and be like, yo, what are you doing? Now don't get me wrong, he's a great kid, extremely intelligent, all those things. But it kind of gave us this weird relationship for a long part of our lives until he really became a man at, 16, 17. And then it was like, okay, now we can be brothers and now we can be friends because like now it's like you kind of have this thing figured out. And so we joke about it now that like for the first 17 years of his life, I was his dad more than I was his brother, but now, I mean, he's my best friend. We spend so much time together. He's phenomenal. And as far as my mom, we never had the traditional like mother-son relationship because she relied on me so much for so many things. And I saw so much as a child. We were always more friends than we were like mother-son, And so I'm grateful for that. I mean, there's definitely, things that are little nuances that like other kids have with their moms that like I don't. Like we can have a very honest and blunt conversation with each other. We don't have to pull punches because it's like, no, we've been through so much together that let's just tell the truth. Like if you're saying something that bothered me, like I'm just going to tell you and vice versa. Right. And so it's kind of given me a little bit different family model than most people, but again, it's shaped everybody into the situations we're in now, right? Like I can call my mom and bounce ideas off of her, this and that, trusting that she's not just going to say, oh, honey, you're great. Everything you do is great, right? Like that's not who she is. Like she's going to kick it to me straight. So I'm extremely grateful for that and for those relationships.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm curious to know like how that approach of, that kind of blunt, like if something's bothering you, just tell it how it is, how that has influenced your working with clients and working, as a coach, which I want to get into. So I'm going to circle back to that because first the people are like, well, what is he a coach of? Tell us a little bit about, so you have your master's in sports psychology, which is so interesting. I'm interested to know like what it was about sports and psychology. Like, how did you land on sports psychology?
Yeah. So I grew up in a football town. I mean, everything we did was there's literally a sign when you pull into our town that says God Family Football. So like it's a religion there. So I was kind of indoctrinated into that at a young age. And then it gave me the opportunity to go to college. Like playing
Mhm.
football gave me the opportunity to be in college. And then after school, I got into coaching and I spent 10 years as in the weight room now. So I transitioned to a strength and conditioning coach, spent 10 years as a college strength coach. And so athletics taught me so much, right? And so I always thought it was really interesting the mindset of really high performing athletes and what went into that and what it took to prepare. If you look at like an Olympic athlete, we'll take the 100-meter dash, for instance. You train 4 years for a race that lasts 10 seconds if you're slow,
Yeah.
right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what is it about that mindset that keeps them coming back? How do you overcome injuries? And I look back on my own career, like I had multiple injuries, I had gotten hurt and I struggled to come back from them. And so just the mindset of an athlete really interested me. And I've always kind of been a nerd for human psychology. Like I always thought that stuff was interesting. So I got the degree in sports psych. And what I realized was I was using it just as much as I was using my exercise science and as much as I was using the X's and O's of what I did on a daily basis. I spent just as much time being a psychologist as I did being a coach.
Mhm.
And so, that really launched what eventually turned into Edge Leadership Academy, right? So it was using those things that I had learned through sports psychology to start building leadership curriculums and start building internship programs and leadership councils and culture development programs for the universities that I was a part of. And it just kind of snowballed from there, right? And I've always wanted to learn more and more and more. And so that led to, okay, I'm going to go back to school and now work on a PhD in psychology,
Mhm.
and kind of pull back from the athletics lens and look at it from a more global perspective and a more holistic perspective.
Yeah. And so when you go into, big corporations with high level into the C-suite or into like big universities, how do you approach those types of corporations? It's like, are they usually through like a mutual contact, or do you kind of just cold go up and say like, look, I got this great program. How do you do that?
Yeah, so from an actual like business standpoint and recruiting standpoint, we don't spend ad dollars. So we actually 2024 will be the first year that we have any ad spend. So we're 4 years into the business. Um, we rely heavily, heavily, heavily on word of mouth, and the biggest thing that we've been able to do is create clients and create relationships where we are not a one-off service. Like it's not like they bring us in one time and then they don't come back. Like
Mm.
our clients are with us year after year after year. And, fortunate for us, for a business standpoint, traditionally their spend goes up year after year after year, and they want us to do more and more and more. And so we really rely on our family, is what we call it, the Edge family, to continue to grow our business. And it has so far, being able to just make those connections. And it's like, when you do a really good job for somebody and you genuinely care about your clients and you genuinely give them everything you have, for you to look at them and say, hey, is there somebody that I should meet? I mean, 99% of the time they're going to say, hey, I got 5 people that you should meet,
Yeah.
and if 2 of those turn into clients, then we're winning. I'm batting better than most paid social media ads. You know what I mean? If I have a 20% conversion rate on 5 referrals, I'm doing it right.
Mhm.
And so, that's kind of how we approach it. That being said, as we continue to grow and as we get bigger, I'm sure we'll have to eventually dip into some of the, some of the paid ad space and do some different things. But for us, man, our clients are our biggest sales team.
Yeah. That's such a cool, and interesting way to look at it, that your clients are your biggest, ad team. And I think it's such a great like reminder for entrepreneurs that it's like you said you're 4 years into the business, right? Like it takes
Mhm.
time. Like it takes time to like build up the foundation to really understand like what exactly you're offering and how, just the ins and outs of it, like the nuts and bolts, like how you're doing it and all that. So, can you take us back to when you started Edge and how that concept came to be? I know you said you were in the gym as a strength and conditioning coach, and then you ended up going for sports psychology. So, if someone like had no idea what Edge Leadership Academy was or is or what they
Yeah.
do, can you give us just a quick little like this is what it is?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it started when I had a young man who was on a team that I was coaching at the time. He was the best leader I'd ever coached. And he came to me and he said, Coach, I've been the best player on every team I've ever been on my whole life. And everybody's always telling me to lead, but nobody ever taught me how. And that was like a light bulb entrepreneurship moment for me, because I was like, oh, this kid's the best leader that I've coached in a decade, and he still feels like he doesn't know how to lead.
Mm,
Right. And so I was like, if he feels this way, usually it's like the kid in high school that has a question and then five other people in the room secretly wanted to ask that same question.
totally.
Right. So for me, I always look at it that way. Like when I hear from clients and when I heard from this young man, it's usually indicative of a bigger population, right? It's usually representative of there's more there. So that was kind of where the idea started. And so I started to put out free content and I decided to walk away from coaching and launch this business. So I started to put out free content geared towards athletics and how to build leaders within your programs. And during the pandemic, I was fortunate to get some clients and be able to start working with teams, whether it was virtually, 99% of it was virtually during the pandemic.
Mhm.
And it started to grow. And all of a sudden I had a business on my hands. And I was like, okay, this is really cool, right? And from there, I've started to like solidify what we were doing. And it's like, okay, this is the actual pathway from no leadership skills to being an elite leader. These are the traits, these are the soft skills, the hard skills, the habits, the things that go along with it. And I had this whole curriculum. And so we started to roll that out with teams and we started to do what we called series. So we would do like 8 meetings with teams where it was like, we called it the Win the Weight series, which was during the pandemic. And then we did leading without the lights. Right. And so we started to roll these out and the response was overwhelming. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. Right. So I had dinner with a friend of mine who was in corporate sales. And I was telling him about what I was doing and he had this really successful career in sales. And he's like, dude, this will crush you in the corporate space.
Mm.
And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, man. He's like, to the point where like, I really like what you're doing. So, I took it with a grain of salt and kind of went back to the drawing board and I'm like, okay, how can I take this into the corporate space? And about 24 hours later, he called me and said, hey, I want to invest. Like I want to put money into this company and I want to be a part of this.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And this was a guy that I've known since high school. And so I brought him on as my business partner. He now owns part of the business and he runs, the majority of our corporate sales division. And so now we've grown to the point where we have different offerings. So kind of 30,000 foot view of what we do. We come in and we may do a keynote address. So say you work for a Chevy dealer and they bring together all the Chevy managers from the East Coast. We would be the person that they would bring in to have speak at the conference or have speak at their event on an individual and on an organizational level. So say you work for XYZ organization and you want to work on your management skills and your leadership skills among your senior staff or your mid-level staff, you would bring us in and we could do a series of workshops where they're interactive workshops. So it's not just me up there talking. It's an interactive workshop with workbooks and things like that. And we'll work through that. We also do mentorship. So some companies prefer for us to get more personal with their employees and spend time with like a select group. So we'll do ongoing mentorship. And then on the individual side, we have a lot of one-on-one clients that we work with that just reach out to us individually. Maybe their organization isn't ready to bring us in, or maybe they're looking to brush up that resume, right? Like maybe there's like, hey, I'm ready to take this jump. I've worked with a lot of people that are in 9-to-5s that are looking to start their own business. And so they reach out to me and they're like, hey, how do I, become a high performer in all these areas? How do I learn to lead a team? How do I learn to build a team? Things that maybe they didn't get exposed to in their traditional corporate setting that they need when they get into the entrepreneurship world. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we do. There's a lot more to it, but that's kind of the 30,000 foot view.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just wanted to give listeners like that, basically that, like that kind of overarching, idea of what it is. And you brought up a couple of things that I was curious about. So working with a lot of leaders, what are some of those common traits that you see in people who are either currently leading or that you're coaching and you're like, for instance, with that young man, what were the traits that you saw in him where you were like, this guy is a leader, like he is? Are there specific traits that are kind of like common?
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, sometimes the entrepreneurial gods look down on you. So what I did when I started the company was I was like, all right, what are the traits of great leaders? And so I started to dig into the psychology research and tracking all these traits down and like down to their base form. Like, well, I had the simplest form. What is it? And lucky for me, they all started with C. So it was like, oh, this is a marketing home run, right? So we had the 5 C's of leadership. And so those 5 C's are character first and foremost, right? And that one is the one that holds everything together. So even when we do it in like a graphic presentation, character is always the one in the middle. So the other four are on the outside. Character is the one that holds everything else together. And then from there, you have consistency, right? So one of the big things that we talk about is, first off, leaders know exactly who they are and who they're not, right? And that's their character. And then they're able to be consistent. They're able to show up on a daily basis and be the same person. They react and act in the same ways, right? And so consistency can either solve 90% of your problems in life, or it'll create 90% of your problems in life, depending on what you're consistent, right? So great leaders are extremely consistent in what they do. The second piece, or the third one, is they're committed. They're committed to the people, they're committed to the vision, and they're committed to the organization, right? They understand that the results are a byproduct of the commitment to those things. And so when they act, they show reflection to those things, right? Then from there is the one that we all talk about, which is creativity, right? If you think about companies that came out of the pandemic and did really well, anybody that made a big pivot, that's a result of creative leadership, right? Like that's a result of somebody that the bullets were flying and he was able to make a decision in the calm, knowing the strengths and weaknesses of their team and their business, and say, hey, this is the way we're going to go. And it worked out really well. And in our language, like creativity is synonymous with leadership. Like when we talk about Super Bowl winning quarterback, right? Nobody says, oh, he managed his team to a Super Bowl win. No, he led them, right? And when we talk about big businesses, nobody says he managed them out of bankruptcy. No, he or she led them out of bankruptcy. Like, so we associate leadership with creativity so closely in our society. And it's because it's reflected in it, right? And then the last one is the C that everybody knows, which is communicate, right? Your ability to be an excellent communicator, not just verbally, but also the way that you listen and the way that your body language and the way that you project yourself, your presence, those things also fall into that. So each of those C's are our overarching themes, right? But within those are hard skills, soft skills that go along with it, the basic understanding of it, right? And we try and walk people through a pathway to each of those C's to where we can start to build all the skills that fall within them.
So if someone is, let's say, like they don't think of themselves as a leader, or no one has ever made that assumption about them or identified that within them, how can somebody start to cultivate those skills if it's not a natural, like if you're, I'm going to use the word introvert, but that might be a generalization, but if you're very like a shy or, more shy or not comfortable public speaking or any of those things, is there hope? Like, can that person still?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There's different types of leaders within every organization, right? And to me, I think the best organizations and the best cultures have people that fill each of those different slots, right? So we kind of use like fun labels for them just for people to get kind of a picture of what we mean. So a lot of times when people think about leadership, they think of what we call the heat seeker, right? So the heat seeker is like a Michael Jordan type. Like they want that star player role. They want to have the hard conversations. They want the ball in their hand when the clock is on the line, right? Like those are the people that we traditionally associate with leadership, but that's just one type, right? So if you move on from that, we also have people in relation or in organizations that are thermostat, right? People that set the temperature by the way that they behave. People that set the temperature for everyone else. So maybe you are that little bit more introverted, but you show up every day and you work and you are just extremely proficient in the way that you do things. And you're not swayed by the water cooler talk or any of the things or office politics and all that. That's a leadership type. That's something that an organization needs. You need people that are thermostats that set the temperature for the rest of the group, right? Through their behaviors. And then you have people that we call extensions, right? So extension cords. These are people that are great at communicating between different levels of the organization. So maybe you have people who are like, hey, this person's really good at communicating with upper management. They may not bring their own ideas. It might be our ideas that they're bringing, but they're great at communicating it and getting things done. They can play the politic game. They can get those things done. That's a type of leadership, right? That's another type. And then you have people that we call guardians of the standard. Like these are people that are consistently paying attention to the little things and they notice when things are off within the organization, right? So if somebody is slipping from a performance standpoint or from kind of doing things the way we want them to be done, like if they're cutting corners, whatever, somebody that notices those things and is able to have those conversations, not in a confrontational way, but just have those conversations, right? That's a guardian of the standard. And so you have all these different roles. And so the way that I tell people to start is to just get out a piece of paper and write down 3 things that come easy to you that are hard for other people. Like that's where you start. And then you figure out, what does that match up with? What leadership role does that match up with? And then as you grow into that and you lean into that leadership role, you then look for opportunities to build those other skills so that you can now play multiple roles, right? Because the really elite leaders are the ones that can play different roles, are the ones that they're a thermostat, but they're also that heat seeker at times. They're the thermostat, but they're also the guardian of the standard. They can also communicate up and down the organization. So they're that extension cord, right? So it's figuring out, what are my innate strengths? What are my inherent strengths? Things that I'm good at that are hard for other people. How do I double down on those things, use those as my foundation, and then look for opportunities to build my skill set in the other directions?
Yeah. If people have trouble figuring out, because I think a lot of the time people don't realize that some of their strengths are strengths, right? They don't realize like, this comes easily to me, but it might not come easily to, John over there or whatever. And I think a lot of the time people don't realize that, they don't realize that things that come easily to you don't come easily to other people. So what are ways that people can figure out the things that come easily to them?
Yeah, what do people ask you to do? Like, what do people, friends and family, what do people ask you? Like, if you're at a party and things come up, what are you the person to do? So for instance, like, I know, like, and this has happened to me multiple times, if the MC of an event, a family event or a wedding or something drops out, I know that people are going to look at me and be like, yeah, you're up.
Yeah.
Like, I know that about me. And so I know that communication is one of my strong suits. I also know that in my family, when there has to be a hard conversation had without emotion involved, they're going to come to me. And so I know that those are my strengths, right? And for a long time, I bucked that. I didn't want to be those things, right? And so I think part of it is listening to the feedback that the world is giving you and then actually taking it in and saying, okay, what specifically about this makes people think that I'm good at, right? And maybe you don't think you're good at it. There was a long time where I didn't feel like I was a great public speaker. I never minded being on stage in front of people. I never minded talking to people, but I didn't think I was this great orator or storyteller that people told me I was. Like, everyone was like, dude, that was a really good talk, or this was a really good speech. And, even dumb little things. And again, it in no way correlates to proficiency, but like, I would give a talk to a team, somebody would videotape it, and it would go viral on social media. So all the feedback was there that it was like, oh, you kind of do have this gift to be able to connect and communicate with people, right? And so sometimes it's listening to the feedback that's out there in the world and being able to bring that in and accept it and be ready to accept that as, hey, this is my gift, right? And then own it from there. That's the other key part, is how do I own it and how do I get even better at it? Because people that own their gifts, they then turn them into competitive advantages. And now you're broadening the gap. Now you're becoming uncatchable, right? From the people that are trying to catch up to you in certain fields.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I love that when, ask family members and friends, like, what am I good at? Because I do think people really struggle with that sometimes, especially if you're kind of like in a rut. It's hard to be like, oh, I'm really good at something, but yeah.
And we're taught to be so humble, right?
Exactly.
Like the world is always saying, like, be humble, be humble, be humble, and don't overshine, right? But what we need to get to the point of understanding is by dimming my light, right? So if I dim my light, I'm not able to light other candles around me. Versus if I burn bright, I can light as many candles as I possibly can. And so we have to shift that narrative for people where, yes, there is a level of humility that has to be there, but you need to be confident, like, own who you are and then take big swings based on that, and be willing to double down on the fact that, like, no, it's okay to know that you're good at something and say, I'm good at this.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And something else I wanted to ask you about, as you're going into these big corporations and big universities and just really like putting yourself out there, how have you been able to do that in a way that, we're talking about being humble, doesn't feel overly egotistical, I guess? And also, as a man of color, I mean, how has that affected everything? I mean, has that changed the game? I can't, I am not a woman of color, so I can't, I don't know, how has that affected just the whole ride?
Yeah, I think there's a balance. I think early on, and I still have it, I'd be a liar if I didn't, I still have imposter syndrome at times, right? Like, I'm 31, I'll be 32 in a couple of years. So I'm young. So not only am I a man of color, but I'm a young man of color. with very little, like, I only have 4 years of experience in a business. I'm now walking into this room with these baby boomers who have been managing and running businesses for years. And I'm trying to convince them to let me teach their people how to be leaders.
Yeah.
Right. So in and of itself, that's a challenge. Right. And so there's something that I hold in my mind, right? That, and this is going to sound egotistical, but I promise it's not. But I heard somebody else say, and I believe it was Gary Vaynerchuk was talking about it, just being proud of your business. And he said, what's the answer to when people say, why should we pick you over other people? Right. And I never say this to clients out loud, but it's what I think in my head. And he says, well, there's a lot of people that play basketball, but not everybody's LeBron James. Right. And so I try to hold that on in my mind, like, no, I am as good as I think I am. Right. And then the other piece is you have to build the evidence behind you. Like, that's really what gives me the confidence when I'm able to walk in these rooms, is the fact that, like, I have a track record of getting results from my clients. I have a track record of clients sticking around. Like, our client acquisition costs and our client retention rates tell a story. Those things give me confidence. And then it's just knowing that no matter what, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do the work. And so that's kind of the things that I lean on when I go in those rooms. When we talk about, being a man of color in the industry and being a man of color in really any industry, I definitely feel an added pressure, right? Like, I'll be the first to admit, I think it's really, really important for me to be successful, because I think it's really important for me to be able to be a role model for people in my community. And I think it's really important for me to be able to be out in front and show young African-American men that you can come from a quote unquote broken home and be a master's student, be a master's holder, be a PhD student, be a business owner, be an author. You can be all these things, right? And you don't have to give up your authentic self, right? So, like, when I speak, I wear a t-shirt and Jordans on stage. I refuse to conform. Like, I'm going to be me. I wear my earrings, my tattoos are out. Like, I am who I am. And I think that authenticity has really been a leverage point for us. I think it's been something that, people resonate with, because it's like, no, this guy isn't going to change. He's going to come in and be himself, and he's going to talk scars and all, right? And he's going to be willing to show that piece. So I think that is an important piece to what we do. And I'd be lying if I didn't feel that pressure every day, which I feel any African-American man that has any type of platform, you should feel that pressure as well. You should. It's a good pressure. It's a responsibility that we have. Right. And so it's definitely, it plays into the mindset, but it's something that is also a privilege for me, right? Because there's a lot of people who had it worse than me that didn't have the opportunities that I had. So to me, I feel like I can't waste it. If I have this platform and I have these opportunities and I'm in these rooms, it's my job and my responsibility to push, our culture forward and be a role model and be an example of what we can be. And who we should be.
Yeah, I love that. And I love just the whole authenticity conversation, which I think really was a big point of 2023. I think that word really kind of like blew up, which I love. Sometimes it loses its meaning, but I think that can be applied to really anyone. And just, it's so funny that you talk about, like, I go in my Jordans and my t-shirt, because that is something, for me, like, I have to be comfortable in what I'm wearing, and I think that people really, it's not silly, it's not like a silly thing. If you were to go up on stage in like a suit with uncomfortable dress shoes, that would affect your entire stature, how you speak. It would just affect everything. And it would be coming from a place that isn't you. And people pick up on that. People really, really resonate with authenticity and really, really repel people that are putting on a show or putting on a fake face or whatever. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's really, they might not even know why, they might not even be able to put words to it, but it would, like
no,
that.
It's a gut feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a visceral reaction. Like, you're like, oh, this isn't real. And I tried early on, like my first couple presentations, I wore a polo and like dress boots and like nice khakis. And I was just like, this is not me. Like I would watch them back. Cause we record all our presentations and stuff. So I'd watch it back and I'm just like, I was uncomfortable watching it.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, man, like, just be you, like, just be who you are. Right. And so, that's, yeah, I think the authenticity piece is just so massive. And I think it's something that our clients really hold on to. Like, that's the number one thing that I hear from our clients is like, oh, dude, like we appreciated how vulnerable you were, or how authentic you were. Like those things to me mean the most. It's one of our company values, right? Is authenticity. Like we say all the time, we'll show up for ourselves, we'll show up show up for our clients, and we'll show up to the world as our authentic self. Like that's who we are. I don't want people to hide from that, right? So like whether it's being on stage talking about, so here's a perfect example. I was on stage at University of Miami football, and I'm up there in front of the entire coaching staff doing a Q&A session after my presentation. And one of the guys says to me, you know, how do you deal with when you get nervous or when you get anxious before presentations or before being on stage or whatever? But I said, it's funny, I'm actually diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And I literally pulled out my anxiety medicine out of my pocket and I held it up in front of the group. And they were like they were, you know what I mean? They were like, oh, like we didn't know. And I'm like, I'm not ashamed of it. Like this is who I am. You know, this is part of my story. And so I think moments like that really help build that relationship with the audience.
Yeah. So that actually brings up an interesting question. How, if someone is in a company, let's say, and they're doing well, or maybe they're struggling, how does somebody maintain authenticity while they're in another person's company? Like that was something for me when I was working for other people before I did my own thing. That was always something that I struggled with, where it was like, you know, how do I adhere and be a good employee and do my part without being like a jerk, you know, but still be true to myself. How is that something that comes up a lot or not?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's something that we struggle with as entrepreneurs too, right? Like how do you be true to yourself when you have a business to run as well, right?
Mhm.
And I think the starting point is to understand that everything we do in life has our signature on it, right? Everything should have your personal touch one way or another. Like you should be able to feel it. I did an interview with a woman that owns a app studio. She built apps, and she was talking about how certain apps you can feel the builder's kind of personality in it. Like there's certain things, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I never thought about it like that, right? But it goes to show every single thing you do has a little bit of your signature on it. And so, what is your signature? And I think that starts with understanding what your vision, your mission, and your values are, how you align yourself with those and how you act in alignment with those things, right? So figuring out your overarching theme, like what do you want for your life? What do you want everything to be, right? So the simplest way to come up with your vision, your mission, your values is to think about your funeral and think about what's the first thing that somebody's going to say, you know, when they stand up and talk about you.
David. On my way here today, I was listening to a Mel Robbins podcast about goals. And this is like a Cornell study that they did. And it's like, this is so top notch. Like, keep going. Yeah. Just keep going.
I love it. Yeah, no, I call it the funeral question, right? So for me personally, I'll share my example.
Sure.
When I die, I want there to be, first off, I want there to be a line out the door, right? I want it to be packed out. And I hope that the first person that stands up to talk about me, he says, Kish left a legacy for his family to be proud of. He inspired greatness in everybody that he came across. He was honest, he was caring, he was driven, and he was committed to growth, right? So if you break that sentence down, if you break that paragraph down, that first sentence, he left a legacy for his family to be proud of. That's my vision in life, right? He inspired greatness in everyone he came across. That's what I did on a daily basis. That was my mission, right? And then those four things, he was honest, he was caring, he was driven, he was committed to growth. Those were the values that I fight for in my life, right? So if you have that eulogy paragraph, you now have something that can guide you through everyday life, right? So every single thing that you do should have a little touch of that in it. Every single thing that you do, right? And so even as simple as like, if I go to the 7-Eleven and I'm buying a coffee or buying a drink or whatever, I try and go back and forth with the cashier a little bit because I want to inspire greatness. Like I want to bring that best version out of them and show them that that's there, right? And so it's little things like that. So you can apply those things within a company when you're working for somebody else, right? Figuring out what's my daily mission? What's the thing that I'm going to do every single day? And if I do it day after day after day and I stack it, I'll ultimately achieve this vision, right? And that becomes your signature. That becomes the way that you do things, right? And so
and the consistency part, right? That you were talking about. Yeah.
You're now super consistent because every single decision goes through the same criteria, right? So think about it this way now. So like as an entrepreneur, when people come to me and, I'm fortunate that we now get opportunities to do brand deals and we get opportunities to do partnerships and things like that. When those emails come to me, I run them through my test. Does it bring me closer to my vision? Does it represent my mission? And does this company or this partner represent the values that I fight for in life? If it's not 3 yeses, I don't do it. It's that simple. And it could be a brand deal, or it could be, am I going to dinner with this person? Or it could be, what time am I getting up tomorrow morning, right? Every single decision makes itself. And so now I'm super consistent because I'm only moving, every single decision I make moves me closer to that vision, that mission and those values. Every single thing that you do, right? And so that's where I would tell people to start, within an organization, is figure out what your signature is and then start put that signature on everything you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, just to kind of go off of that, it's a really good way to also kind of weed out people who don't really align with you, right? Or who, and it doesn't make them a bad person. Like, that's not what I'm saying. It just means that you're in different, whatever realms, or you can choose your word, but it's a really good way to do that. And I think if someone it takes your advice and does this and runs up against people who it feels like almost like they're not really getting it, or, they're kind of like, what, like, this is weird. That is okay. It just means that what I'm getting at is, you don't have to stop. That's not a sign to like stop what you're doing. Like, I think it's really difficult to stay consistent because it's not going to be easy, right? And I think that's something that you're millennial, yeah. So millennials, like, we've kind of come to realize where it's like, oh, life isn't just going to be easy. Like, we're kind of at the point in life now where it's like, work will be work regardless. Like, you can be doing something you love every day, but it's still going to be work. And I think that a lot of millennials have kind of like realized this. So if anyone out there hasn't realized this, or is, Gen Z or younger, just because somebody pushes back against you doesn't mean you're on the wrong path, doesn't mean that the decision you made is wrong. It just means that person might not be on that same path. They might not have those same values, and that's totally fine. I always get like nervous for people when they come up against that and they're like, oh, but then like, these people are kind of really like pushing back against me. And it's like, well, that's okay. That doesn't mean that your values are wrong for you. So my question to you is like, how can someone kind of garner that confidence? That was another C, right? To stay consistent.
Yeah, I think you have to get to a point where you're able to pull back a little bit and like see things from a bigger picture. And exactly like you said, just understand, hey, this person's just not on the same journey as me, right? They're just not there yet. And that's okay. You're in your process. Good for you. You will get there eventually. I'm here now. So that means I got to keep going this way. I'm sorry. It doesn't mean anything about you. It's just, this is where I'm at. This is where you're at. It's not compatible at this moment.
Yeah.
Right. And so when somebody's pushing back on me or somebody's giving me advice, I'm very, very careful about who I take advice and opinions from now. Now, obviously, everybody in today's world wants to give unsolicited advice and opinions. Everybody has an opinion about your life and what you should be doing and who you should be, etc. Right. But my number one thing is always, would I change lives with that person? Like, if I take your advice, because here's the reality of it, right? If I take your advice, that means I'm going to start using your inputs. That means I'm going to get your outputs.
Right.
Would I want those outputs? Do I like your relationships? Do I like where you're at financially? Do I like where you're at physically? Do I like where you're at mentally, emotionally? All these things. Because if I start to do the things that you're advising me to do, then I'm going to end up like you. So would I change lives with you?
Yeah.
And if I wouldn't, then I just don't take the advice. And it's just, it doesn't mean I tell people like, hey, I'm not taking your advice. It's just, I'll let you talk. Good for you. Get it out. But in my heart, I already know I'm not taking your advice.
Yeah. And it's almost like when you're talking, it's almost like, I kept thinking of ChatGPT, where it's like the prompt you put in, like if you were to take advice from that person, it's almost like, imagine that you're on ChatGPT, you put that advice in, it will output exactly what they're doing. And that's essential. Like, you are ChatGPT. So if you insert that advice into you, what comes out will be from that prompt, right? So how comfortable are you living that, basically?
Yeah. And understanding, like, maybe we have different goals. And I think this is something that needs to be addressed. There's so much on social media about like building $1 million business or a multi-million dollar business or becoming a 7-figure entrepreneur, driving a supercar, all these things. Listen, it is okay if you want to have a great life and have a white picket fence and have a 401k and have a family And don't, everybody doesn't have to chase the same things. The 1% of quote unquote successful people, first off, by whose metric?
Right.
Second off, right? But we'll say financially right now. We'll just say like you're 1% financially successful. You're one of those 1%ers. There's a reason that there's 1%, right? Because 99% of people aren't there. And here's the reality. You might get there. You might not want that. You don't want that life, and that's okay. So I think it's really important to understand what you want. Like what does success look like for you? What does the rich life and the good life look like to you? It doesn't have to be what it is to everybody else. Like, and I've said this before, I wouldn't want to be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. I don't want their problems.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want their problems. I don't want that life. I want a life where, to me, I define it as I can do what I want with the people that I want when I want to do it. That to me is the good life, right? I can create, I can train, I can journal, I can read, I can write, I can impact people on my terms. That's the good life to me. What is that financial number? I have no idea.
Yeah. And the other thing, like, you don't have to justify it to people, right?
No,
Yeah.
it's my life.
Yeah.
It's my life, right? Like, you don't need people to understand. I think that's something that we mess up a lot.
Yeah.
Is like, we get frustrated, especially when it's somebody you care about, right? Like, you want people to understand you. And when you start to really chase your own vision and mission and values and really live in alignment with the person that you want to become, you have to come to terms and be accepting of the fact that not everybody is going to understand. And that's okay. Like you said earlier, it doesn't say anything about them. It doesn't make them a bad person. Like, there are times where, again, I talked about my relationship with my mother. I love her to death. There's times where she doesn't understand. She just doesn't get it. That's because she's a sum of her experiences and her values and what's going on in her life. And so she doesn't understand it, and you have to be okay with that. It doesn't mean anything about either party. It's just different. You're chasing different goals. They're trying to make pizza. You're trying to make Italian food, or you're trying to make Chinese food, right? Like, it's just different goals, different ingredients, different outputs.
Yeah, totally. So when we got on quickly, before we started to record, you were talking about this crazy tour that you're doing, which sounds insane. So, I mean, I could keep talking to you about your business and all of that like forever. But I do want to touch on this because it sounds like a lot of fun and a lot of work. So what are you doing? You're going on a tour.
Yeah. So we're going on a tour right now. So this is really fun. It started kind of by accident, honestly. So 2 years ago now, we booked a series of clients. And at that point, we were just saying yes to like almost every opportunity that came our way. Obviously, we were running it through that vision, mission, value test, but we were saying yes to a lot of opportunities. And it happened to where we booked I think it was 8 at the time. We booked 8 engagements in different states in an 8-week period. And it was, like I said, complete coincidence. It was just boom, 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 boom. And we were like, yo, let's call this the tour. Like, let's do this.
Yeah.
So me and my business partner went on the road, and we're flying around to different cities, and it was really fun. And we were like, all right. So that was the spring tour of, 2023 or 2022. And we're like, dude, let's run it back in the summer, but let's do it with colleges. Like, let's go to campuses. So we were like, okay. So then that summer we did the college campus tour. So we booked a bunch of engagements on college campuses, and we went around and we did keynotes, and we did coaching sessions, and we did leadership council sessions on all these different college campuses. And it was awesome. And the other thing was, from a business standpoint, it was a huge content driver for us. Like, we were able to get almost a year's worth of content in 8 weeks. Right. And so it was like this really cool thing that we started to do. And then people started to resonate with it. And they were like, hey, when are you going to be in this city? And so we were like, oh, okay. So we could book engagements with clients, but then at night in that city, we could have like a VIP dinner, or we could have a meet and greet or an open bar or something. So that's what became what we're doing now, which is our Built Not Born tour. So we already did our first 2 dates, and then we had a month off for the holidays. Now we're leaving. I leave next week for Texas. And so we have 9 dates left, and it's on our social media. We'll be in all those cities. And what we're trying to do is we're doing the event during the day. And then at night we're hosting, whether it's an open bar or a meet and greet or some sort of networking session or something in those cities. And sometimes we're going to like local gyms, and we're just doing like pop-up keynotes.
Oh, cool.
So we'll just do like a pop-up event, and it's like, whoever's in the gym, if you want to stay, great. Like, we'll advertise it like the day before. and be like, hey, we're going to be at Barbell ATX, which is in Austin, Texas. Like, we're going to be here from this time to this time. We're going to talk about high performing habits. Like, come in if you want to, right? So it's become this really cool thing that's a part of what we do as a business now. And it's fun for me. Like, me and my business partner love it because we're traveling and we're having fun and, connecting with like-minded people. Like, that's the most important thing for me. Like I said, I want to be the driving force behind as many people's success as I possibly can. And so to be able to be out and doing these things with people is so fun for me. Especially when like you spend the day doing a corporate event and doing like a corporate workshop, and then at night, like it's like you get to
It's like Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, like you get to go out, like spend time with people in the trenches, so to say. Like last year we were in Miami and we did an event during the day. So in the morning was a corporate event. Afternoon we spoke to the University of Miami football coaches. And then that night we took a group of VIPs out to a Brazilian steakhouse. And then we went to the Marlins game and we did a meet and greet afterwards at like a little bar on the beach in Coconut Grove. And like that was that's a core memory for me as a business. Like that was a moment for me where I was like on the beach and I was like, this is my life now. Like this is what I need to do. Like, this is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you remember the name of the Brazilian steakhouse?
I do not, but I could definitely find it.
I'm in Delray Beach, which is just north of Miami, and my husband's Brazilian, so he's always like, "What Brazilian steakhouse?"
No, it was good.
Yeah,
great food, great wine, great food, great wine.
Yeah.
Great time.
That's so fun. Oh my God. Okay, so real quick, I have kind of like a rapid fire kind of thing. So,
oh, shoot him! I like.
Okay,
this.
cool. Do you have, or what is your favorite quote or mantra?
My absolute favorite quote. Man, that's hard because I'm a quote guy. Like I'm like,
me too. That's why I ask.
I have them everywhere. Yeah, it's so hard. My absolute favorite quote would probably be the entire "Man in the Arena" speech.
Oh yeah,
from Roosevelt. I think that fits in like multiple rooms in my house. Like people think it's weird because I have it like framed like around my house. So I just love it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. One of your 2024 goals.
I would like to buy at least $500,000 in real estate this year.
Ooh, that's a good goal. Okay, so I know you started as a strength and conditioning coach. So if someone's looking to get into working out or start a strength and conditioning routine or regimen, how can they do that? What is like the first thing that they should do?
It's called competency, capacity, and load, right? So competency means learn to move well. So just move. That's it. Stretch, move, squat, sit in a deep squat, those things.
Okay.
Then capacity, which is do it over and over and over, and then load it. And so whatever movements you're doing, now pick up a dumbbell and do the same movement.
Oh, okay.
So it's competency, capacity, and load. People overcomplicate it. 3x10 works.
Okay. I have to do that. I have to do a weight. What is your favorite song to work out to right now?
Ramen and OJ by Meek Mill. I like that.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Cool. Kit, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to talk about?
No, this was fun. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate you having me on. I hope I added some value for your listeners, and I know I had fun doing it.
Awesome. No, you definitely did. So keep an eye out. We're going to include all of Coach Kitch's everything in the show notes. So if you want to go to one of his shows that he's on tour doing right now, or check out his book or his Instagram, any of that will be in the show notes. And David, you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. I'm so grateful for your precious time and energy. And if anything resonated with you, please feel free to share with a friend and subscribe. If you're interested in career coaching, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Courtney@resume-careers.com and follow me on Instagram at Courtney Austin Page. Thank you so much and see you next week.